Do we really need the cross to believe, or Mickey Mouse to dream? Or is the faith that we're all looking for in the space in between? I want to take you back to the scene of 2018, where everybody is booking their end-of-year school finale trips to the usual places. Ibiza, Magaluf, Santa Ponza. You get the gist. Well, I signed up to go on a trip with my local youth club because leaving school I wanted to be sensible. They mentioned Disneyland Paris and I was completely sold. I thought, I'm ticking the bucket list, I'm going to meet Mickey, I'm going to see the castle. That's a double tick, and it's a sensible choice because all my friends are going to get drunk elsewhere. But what I hadn't realised or paid attention to was the fact that I would have to be spending 7 days on a religious pilgrimage in an isolated French mountaintop. I guess my brain just switched off during that bit. But lo and behold, a few weeks pass, I've paid the deposit, I've got the emergency passport, causing a lot of drama. And we eventually get to France, do our 2-hour bus journey. And as I step off in the 25-degree heat, it is not Disneyland. It is, in fact, the religious pilgrimage in an isolated French mountaintop called TEDx. And when I get off the bus, I'm in my full Primark glam, so people would have thought I was going to the likes of Ibiza. And I had the matching suitcase, a matching handbag, and I'm trailing the suitcase through the sand and the stone. And as I take my sunglasses off, it all attacks me. And while I get all the sand and stone out of my eyes, everybody begins to stare at me. And it's because the outfit I'm wearing definitely does not meet the backdrop of prayer. But here I am, and I know I have to spend 7 days here, so all I can say to myself is, only 7 days, only 7 days, only 7 days to Disneyland. We are then introduced to the other people from all over Ireland who have come on this trip, who we'll be sharing living quarters with. Yeah, just to add, I'm going to be having to socialise with complete strangers. So we are all introduced to each other and brought to our rooms. But then we find out it's 6 people to a room with no locks on the doors, because apparently this is a place of faith. And my anxiety begins to grow because not only am I with strangers, but there's no locks on the doors. Next thing you know, they tell us there's only 1 socket for electricity to do 26 people across 6 different bedrooms. And I have truly entered a Gen Z, a millennial's worst nightmare. And after we're told that the Wi-Fi isn't obviously available along with the internet, there's no washing machines, there's no hairdryers, there's no mirrors, no cosmetic appliances, and it truly has entered survival of the fittest. But this is only day 1. So I say to myself, you've just got to embrace this. Maybe you'll lose weight, maybe you'll get a little fitter, maybe you'll get a bit more grit. Bit like Bear Grylls, bit dramatic, but... And I tell myself that, but that mentality only lasts for a couple of hours or so. Because you see, at this point in my life, faith isn't my strong point. I've just studied philosophy at school and pondered questions like, what's the meaning of life? What is morality? And what happens after you die? Questions that my 2 devout Catholic grannies would be ashamed of me questioning. But as I go on this journey, my primary focus is to go to Disneyland to meet Mickey Mouse. So we settle down for the night, and we're brought up to get our meals, and we're offered a token book where if you lose a token for any of your meals, you're snookered because you're not getting it. And when we queue up for our meal, there's hundreds of people. And just to give you a bit of a background about my relationship with food, I tore my ligaments in my last year of school racing for chicken curry down the stairs in St. Dominic's. So you could only imagine how upset I was that I had to queue behind these thousands of people, because I still got to the top of the queue, even with the torn ligaments. So when we get to the front eventually, I'm like, thank God, I'm going to get something to eat here. Then they hand me a plate, and what meets my eyes is not what I expected. There's a small portion of mashed potato, 1 plum, and 1 sugary-like substance that's meant to be a yoghurt. Well, I just let the overwhelm kick in, and I just begin to laugh, because what else can you do? And I'll tell you something, I had plums 3 times a day for 7 days of that week, and I've never looked at a plum ever since. Never again why I have another plum. But like I said, I tried to embrace the positive, but it only lasted a couple of hours because I found the local shop within the camp called the Oyak, and I was never out of it. I found out that they sold Mars bars, not my top 5, but beggars can't be choosers. So I get 5 Mars bars a day to fill the void in my stomach because that food is definitely not appetizing. So as we're sitting eating our meal, I receive a phone call from my mother, and in true West Belfast fashion, she says, "Well, how's it going?" And I reply and just begin to laugh and cry, and I'm like, "You don't realise what I've set myself up for. I should have just went to Ibiza." And she's like, "Well, what do you want me to do about it? I can't get you out of here. I have no money to get you to leave." So I guess I've no other choice but to take her advice. So we go and settle in our rooms for the night, and I just tell myself, that's day 1 completed of the Bear Grylls mission. Let's get on to the next. So I managed to get some sleep, but about 3 a.m., I need to go to the toilet, and the part I hadn't realised was the toilet was half a mile away up a large hill. So trying to navigate that at 3 a.m. in the morning isn't where you want to be when you already don't have locks on your doors. So the next day comes, and we're awakened by the sun shining in, so we're starting the day off with our positive affirmations. I'm privileged to be here and seeing the sun coming in. So as we arrive for breakfast, one of the girls from Cork tells me, we're not even there 24 hours, by the way, "Oh, I'm leaving today." And I'm like, "We haven't even been here 24 hours. She goes, "Oh, no, my daddy has arranged for me to go home via a private Mercedes-Benz and a business class plane ticket." Lucky for some, but I just wouldn't admit that I was jealous, to be honest, that my mummy couldn't get me home from here. And as the second day sets in, with that one socket that we have, someone has the bright idea, "Oh, we'll put a plug into the socket with an extension lead. So 5 of us can charge our phone at once." Great idea on paper, but after 5 minutes, with 5 phones plugged in, the whole electricity blew. Another Gen Z and millennials' worst nightmare. We're officially off the grid. And to make things worse, like I said, at this point in my life, I wasn't religious. We're called the scripture class in a big, huge tent. And when we arrive at the tent, they want to look in our bags. And I start to whisper to the girl next to me, "Why are they looking at our bags as if this is a concert? We're going to listen to scripture." But it turned out that a priest was stabbed to death in this very tent 2 years before. And suddenly, this whole trip is given true crime and not find your faith in a place of prayer. So when the scripture class is over, and I'm in my total survival instinct after being told all this information, we go back to our living quarters, but we have no phones, we have no technology, we have none of the usual assets that we have at home to entertain ourselves. So we're all just sitting staring at each other, really. And then someone begins to decide to do a beatbox. And we're all looking at each other like, this is a bit weird. But you know what? We're all bored, so any activity is fair game at this point. So we decide to make a rap about our experience in the pilgrimage. Weird and funny. But even the girl who didn't last 24 hours got a feature. And yes, it won't be a top hit, but she still got there. And her line is, "But one didn't survive. Now she's in for a long drive." So she's away in her merry way, and we're sitting here rapping. But somewhere in the midst of that, I realized that it took us not having the internet to actually truly become connected to one another. And we began to have conversations with strangers as our natural selves, actual passionate, non-superficial conversations that weren't the likes of Snapchat streaks. And when we begin to break down those barriers, I meet a couple of strangers, 2 from Amsterdam, who are studying the conflict in Northern Ireland, a girl from Poland who tells me about her journey of fighting her faith, oh, and the guy from Cork who bought the last 2 Mars bars of the Oyak, but I bought shares in that department, so I got them back. And what I realized during those conversations is there's people who are studying our own history when we don't even sit long enough with our own stories to process it and heal it. And as those days go on, they do go slow, but we do begin to adapt. We do it without the glitz, without the glam, without the filters, without Mickey Mouse. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos of survival instinct and being stuck, isolated in a French mountaintop, I suddenly don't want to leave. And it's not because I've went on this huge spiritual journey of finding my faith again. Yes, other people are there, but it's because I've truly got to connect to other strangers and humans in an authentic way. And as the day approaches to go to Disneyland, don't get me wrong, I'm still excited because my main motivation was always to see Mickey. We get on our bus, and it's a 4-hour journey, but about 2 hours in, we have a stop off to get a meal. And I order the biggest steak possible because my protein intake has been so poor since I've been there for that week. But when I'm eating that steak, it's really different this time because a week ago, this steak was a comfort for me, and today it was a luxury. And with every bite that I embrace, I realize that you do really appreciate the things that you go without for a while. And it's really important to take note of the small things. And that's what I learned in that camp, was that when we were stripped of all our superficial elements and materialism, we were still able to be who we actually are as human beings through connection and sharing. And we developed in a different way through resilience. And when I get to the luxurious hotel in Paris, which I am glad to see, so I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't glad to be in Paris, because I was. I realized that all my clothes are sticky with plum juice, red sauce, you name it, because there was no washing machine. And let's just say my skills at washing on the board were not the best. So we get locked out of the room just before the bus is about to leave, and I just have to go in what I'm wearing. And when I eventually get there, I do get that picture with Mickey Mouse that was on my bucket list. But I'm wearing a satin green top with a toothpaste stain, black and white trousers stained with red sauce, and pink mismatched shoes. And all I could think was, this wasn't the moment that I imagined. And it wasn't that I was ungrateful, because I certainly wasn't, because this was something I always wanted in my life. But it didn't give me that same feeling where I had to wash my clothes by hand, where I had no Wi-Fi, I had no phone, and actually had to sit down and have real human connection with other people. It made me realize the importance of identity as an individual and not through a device of technology. And when I get to the end of my trip, it makes me reflect. Yes, I've met Mickey Mouse. Yes, I've done the pilgrimage. But where did I feel the real connection? So I'd like to ask you all again, do we really need the cross to believe? Or Mickey Mouse to dream? When the faith that we're looking for is in the space in between? And maybe the changes that we are trying to make in Northern Ireland don't have to be loud or political. Yes, it has its place, but maybe it's important for us to take a step back and master the slow change, the change of slowing down enough to hear yourself think. Maybe we should be mirroring our humanity in one another and finding the value in one another instead of taking part in division and breaking each other down. It's about changing your perception and creating a sense of community and commonality in a space that tries to keep us so divided. Change doesn't always have to be large and drastic. It can be the small things. And that's where the magic of daring to change will really happen. From the Irish proverb, we live in the shelter of one another. Thank you.